Welcome to Timeline. We are here at Met University in Budapest, Hungary. A great place to be at any part of the year indeed, but the perfect place to be to discuss about such topics as the roots and origins of the Hungarian people, the unique traits of their language, and historical connections with other peoples of Europe and of the East. Stay with us. Chakieva is here with us, the Associate Professor of Turkology at the Oriental Institute in the Catholic University in Budapest. I'm pleased to have her in our show. Professor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Sure thing. Hungarian people often tell me that the foreigners here who are history buffs, they're interested, where do Hungarians come from? So can you tell us what are the origins of the Hungarian people?
Hungarian people first appeared on the territory of history south to the Ural Mountains. Ural is the mountain that divides Europe from Asia.
Yes.
And it was the southernmost kind of area where Hungarians are mentioned first, for the first time. They are made mention only in Muslim sources first. It was Ibn Fadlan, a tradesman, an Arab tradesman who traveled in order to get some fur, most probably, from Siberian people. And on his route, he met Hungarians, and he wrote down everything concerning their habits, their location, their society, whatever was possible for him. So it was not in Asia where Hungarians are mentioned first as Hungarian. We have the information, the most information about this hazy period. You know, there were no videos, no cameras, nothing at all.
No Facebook, no Twitter, no YouTube.
No. So what are our sources for this very early period is, first of all, language. And language history helps a lot to find out what was, how it happened, and who took part in the whole procedure. So Hungarians first appeared next to the Ural Mountains, and from there, as all the other nomads, they started to migrate westwards. And this is the migration that took them some 5 to 1000 years. So when they are first mentioned, it is something like 500 before Christ. And they settled to the Carpathian Basin in 896, something like it. Not exactly, but most probably in 896. So this whole procedure, all these centuries were spent in the vicinity of several and different Turkic people. So they were friendly or hostile, sometimes this and the other times that. But our language and our culture was developing under these circumstances. So Turkic is a vital point when we try to find out about this very early period.
So can I ask you the point of that, Turkic?
Yes.
So the names of the Hungarian nobles at the time of the conquest are almost exclusively Turkic. Why is that, actually?
How do you know this?
Well, I mean, I read upon it before the show, actually.
In fact, we do not know much details. The earliest chronicles are written down several centuries later about how Hungarians settled down here. So we do not know very important details about their names. But still, there are very important words in our language that preserved that historical circumstance.
But can I ask you, so the Hungarian Holy Crown, on it says Geza the Pious King of the
Pious
Turks.
King, yes,
Pious
yes.
King of the Turks.
Yes, exactly. Now, we have to consider the map. We have to think about, can I go there for a moment?
Go ahead, please.
So, first, Hungarians are mentioned in this area. This is the Ural Mountains, and they appeared somewhere here. They are made mention of. So they were migrating this whole route westwards, and all this area was covered by Turks, different kind of Turks. And then also we know that in this time, in this early period, it was the Byzantine people who were trading around the Black Sea. It was not only the Byzantines, but also Italian tradesmen, but the Byzantines had very important effect on the people around the Black Sea, and it was Christianity, first of all. And Christianity had very early writings, chronicles, etc. So we know that the Byzantine Caesar, it was Constantinos Porphyrogennetos, who sent the first crown for the Hungarian king as a present when he settled with his people, and it was written on it to Jehovica, the pious king of the Turks, because all the Hungarians, all the barbar people coming from the east, in the eye of a Byzantine, it was Turk, no question. They behaved like Turks. They also spoke a kind of Turkic language, we presume.
Yeah, we keep hearing now in our school as well the similarities, the apparent similarities between Turkish and Hungarian, right?
Yes, it is one of my favorite topics, language history. If we consider the different types of languages, for instance, the Indo-European languages were spoken on a very big area, whereas Finno-Ugric languages or Altaic languages were not. But still we find similarities between, for instance, Arabic and Norwegian, because they belong to the same kind of system. Chinese speak another kind, but Uralic, I mean Finno-Ugric and Altaic people speak very similar languages from the point of view of structure.
Is it a misconception that the Hungarian origins is actually the roots of the Hungarian language is actually Uralic Altaic? Is that a misconception, actually?
No. We consider it as a proved thing. It was proven by the language historians who made a comparison between the Finno-Ugric languages spoken today, and we started to go backwards step by step and considered what the earlier sources at hand are available. The earliest sources for Uralic languages is Hungarian.
Oh, okay.
And as for the Altaic languages, it is most probably the runic inscriptions of Turkic.
The origins, the roots of the Hungarian language are
Uralic.
Uralic, okay.
Yes, but we mustn't mix up language and people, because people can change their language. Mm-hmm. They can be influenced by other languages. As in our days, English is spoken also in South Africa and Australia, and they have nothing in common if we consider the origin of the ethnic itself.
In the 19th century,
yes.
As I read, most of the Hungarian historians, experts, let's say, they claimed that the origins of the Hungarian language is Turkic. So why in the 19th century, if we know that the relationship between Turkey and Hungary before that was not that good with all the wars? I mean, Turkish people, they came all over to Buda, right? So why in 19th century then they actually claimed like that much that the origins is Turkish?
If we want to speak about this topic, we would have to remember that there are 3 different periods Hungarians met Turkic people. The first was the one I mentioned in front of the map. That was the earliest period, but maybe the most effective, when culture itself started to develop and kind of a mutual culture was developed by Turks and Hungarians together. Now the second period is considered after they have settled, Hungarians settled into the Carpathian Basin. There came some kind of tradesmen as pechenegs, the Uz people, some important events I cannot mention. The middle period is considered the 13th century, when the Mongolian tribes started to move westwards, and it is the so-called Mongol era, when several tribes and people escaped from them, and so they settled to the Carpathian Basin. It was called the Kuman people. It is the 13th century. And the third period when Hungarians met Turks is the Ottoman era, when the Ottomans came and wanted to invade Europe, but Hungarians stopped them, and they could not proceed to Vienna.
Yeah, we know about the famous battle at Sziget, right?
Yes. So these are the 3 periods, and of course, due to the events, the results of their effects on the culture itself is different. When there is a friendly contact, they can just flourish, these cultural developments. But unlike in warlike periods, it is very different. Then they do not communicate, then they try to avoid meeting them. It is natural.
But during the Hungarian conflict, let's say, with the Austrians, with Vienna,
yes,
many of the prominent Hungarian nobles, they actually ran to Istanbul, right?
Quite a lot, quite a few. And we are very grateful to the Ottomans that they accepted Hungarians and they offered them place to stay, and they were safe there. And we still have those places as monuments of our history. Very important.
somehow, whenever we discuss the topic with the Hungarians, somehow the name of Attila the Hun just pops up in the conversation. So what does Attila the Hun actually have to do with Hungarians, actually?
Huns were a very famous nomadic people who migrated westwards as far as today's France. So they were very successful and very powerful and very frightful for Europeans. As for the name of the Hungarians, there are several names for the Hungarians. As any nomadic people, we also had a self-denomination that was Magyar all the time. And the other name was given by foreigners for that group. So, Ungar, Wenger, Hungarian, Hongrois, all these developed from a Slavic word, Eastern Slavic. So it was the Onogur, the name of the Onogurs that was given to us. And Hungarian and Hungary developed from that stem, but it is not our name.
So Attila the Hun, besides Hungarians, Turks and Mongols also believe there are somehow, they have some connections towards him.
Attila was a great personality. He must be very good for any ethnic group to belong to, because he was considered to be very powerful, very strong, and very fierce, and they managed to overcome almost any territory. So he was really something of great importance in his age. We have to think about nomadism itself. That is a very hard kind of lifestyle, and it was well spread throughout the steppe region. Huns were the easternmost point, and Hungarians became the westernmost point, and on this huge area there were many, many other people as well. Now, nomad has to be, first of all, very inventive, because he has to find enough pasture for the herds every day. So he considered himself as a free person, free of anybody, and free to invent, free to move to any direction almost. And they despised people living in towns, settled down. So nomadism is a kind of strength in itself, because people who are living that way, almost spending their whole life on horseback, they are able to fight not only men, but women as well, and children also are taught from a very young age. So Huns came from that kind of lifestyle, but many other groups, like Hungarians, for instance, or Turks, for instance, were also migrating kind of nomads. Now, if it was a Mongolian tribe originally, or if it was a Turkic tribe originally, we cannot decide, and it is impossible to decide. Anyway, they were intermingled, most probably. And many of our historians say they must be Turk, but unfortunately there are only 3 and not more, but 3 words that remained from the Huns, so we do not even know what language they were speaking. These 3 words are the names of beer, several different kind of beer.
Oh, beer, actually.
Beer, actually,
Oh,
what
really?
you drink, yes. And it is written down in Byzantine source, but otherwise we do not know what kind of religion they had. They must have had kind of like the one that is most probably spread on the steppe region, a kind of natural religion that is belonging to people living under the sky, on the earth. They had gods like huge stones or mountains or valleys, or the sky itself was considered as a god. So these are mere speculations. We have no source to rely on, unfortunately. I would say they were Turks or Mongolians. I cannot prove them.
But can you just ask about the distinction between the words, I mean, for the viewers as well? So, Turkish and Turkic.
Yes.
Can you tell us, I mean, the difference?
Oh, yes, of course, why not? Turk is a big, huge group, and there are numerous, at present, some 72, 73 present-day Turkic languages, like Uzbek, Kyrgyz, Kazakh, Tatar, Bashkir, Chuvash, or Turkish is one only of them. So if we consider, Turkic is a very, very big group, and it has slices like little languages.
So Turkish belongs to the group of Turkic languages, let's say like that.
Yes, Turkish is the language of the present day Turkey. We consider Turkish as the language, the official language of present day Turkey. While Turkic is valid for both historical Turkic names, languages, like Chagatai, for instance, that was spoken and written, especially it is a literary language of the Middle Ages, but it is not spoken anywhere now, or Ottoman, that was spoken especially in the Ottoman Empire, but it is not spoken anywhere now. But it is a Turkic language.
So can you tell us some words, maybe some expressions that both Hungarian and Turkish actually share?
Oh, yes.
Turkic origins?
Oh, yes, there are a lot, and it is one of my research topics. As I mentioned, there were 3 different layers, 3 different periods of time when Turks and Hungarians got into contact. And the first is the most valuable. Why is it more valuable than the rest? Because there are not only several hundreds of words that we borrowed from the Turks from that period, but some, or many of them, got lost from present-day Turkic languages, but we still have it. Why? How can it happen, you may ask? Because there came, for instance, the influence of the Islam, and Arabic and Persian words, Iranian words, changed the original Turkic forms, but we still have it for them. So they should be thanking for the Hungarians for this service once. Now, for instance, just a few words.
Yes, please.
I also have to mention, from the point of methodology, we have to make difference between ordinary words, such as a noun, an adjective, a number, or whatever it is, and verbs. could you just try to imagine how difficult it is to understand what a verb exactly means? Now, for instance, the verb ér in Hungarian. Ér means so many different things in Hungarian, but we borrowed it from Turks, and it is also a very important verb because it belongs to the basic word stock of the Hungarians. The basic word stock is very valuable because there are the names of the relatives like father, mother, daughter, and son, and numbers belong to that. And the parts of nature that are valid for the period when the basic vocabulary is developing. Now, there are the names of the parts of the body that also belongs to the basic vocabulary. Now, some of them is common with Turks. I would have to mention some important details. There is a kind of a very old Mongolian language called Khitan, spoken in the easternmost part of the steppe region, and they have the same stem as we do from old Turkic languages, and there are a few words like to write. When you use the Hungarian verb ír, to write, they have the same stem of it. And also it was mediated by old Turkic people to both group of people. It is important to search all the details of these stems. Why just that word? Why was it important for those people, you can ask. And also the details that are preserved in folklore are very important, because folklore was somehow not written, especially not at the very beginning. So everything that we have in folklore was preserved by verbal forms. All these forms can be detected in epos, for instance, the Turkic epos. There are a lot written, handed down, very late, but still they have it. They know it even today. There are proverbs, very short forms, and the system of the way of thinking is exactly the very same as reflected in the very first Hungarian written text. So we have to say that there was a very important influence from that earliest period. I don't know if I should make mention of some strategies of language historians who say that much more valuable are the verbs that are borrowed from another language at an early period. And we have quite a few Turkic verbs in Hungarian.
But is there actually an influence on some Turkish expression that the Turks actually took from Hungarian, let's say?
Why not?
Yes?
Yes, why not? It is not a silly question. As far as two people are on friendly terms, they meet each other every day, they get to know each other's customs, religion, agriculture, whatever. We learned a lot on the field of agriculture from Turks, we learned the name of wheat, barley, and many, many names of fruits and vegetables. So they started to settle down and taught their friends, the Hungarians, the same system, how to cultivate lands, how to bring up a horse, for instance, how to look after, how to cure it. All these are very important, but for instance, there are words like the kochi, that means coach.
Okay.
They have it
It's
also.
the same in Croatia actually as well, kočija in
Yes.
Croatian.
Yeah. So there are lots of theories why this language can influence the other one and why the other one cannot. It always depends on the cultural level of the groups. And Turks were more developed than Hungarians in this very early period, so it is more especially it has to do with that.
Right now we are in Budapest.
Yes.
Let's say the heart of Europe, very central Europe. And like around us, I mean, it's Slavic nations, Romania as well, which belongs to the Romance languages, and Austria as well, Germanic. So, I mean, how did Hungarians preserve the language for so long, I mean, till now, 2018?
Well, it is maybe the most important part of culture, any culture, the language, because language has to serve the people, they are using it, and if one cannot communicate, then a nation is dead or distinguished.
Yes.
We can presume. Now, Hungarian has no related languages in the surroundings, nowhere in the vicinity, but I think it is still changing a lot. Hungarian will maybe have to face the situation many minor Turkic groups are facing. For instance, people who escaped from the Caucasus to the Ottoman Empire gradually got assimilated. So it can happen to Hungarians, but still we have enough children to grow up and become Hungarians and speak the language. It can happen. There are, in the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, had a symposium last month in Budapest here, and they were discussing this problem. It is unfortunately a possible situation that Hungarian language will come to an end, but we still keep hoping that not in the near future.
Trying to preserve it, yeah.
Yes.
But did it changed a lot? Like, let's say
Yes,
in the last
yes, it did considerably. For instance, what we know for sure, every single word in Old Hungarian was completed by a vowel. So every word had a vowel at the end. But why do we know it? How can we know it? You may justly ask, and the answer would be Hungarian language history. Anyway, all these final vowels became closed and gradually got lost. So in Middle Hungarian already we do not have them, but in the earliest written texts we have all this. So it is a considerable change, for instance, but we can see the considerable changes in each 5 category of languages such as phonology, morphology, lexicology, and syntax, and we cannot say that any of them is developing or changing at the same speed. Some change very easily, some change much slowly, but each 5 layer is changing, keep changing.
With all the history of Hungary as well, that it was influenced by the other nations around it,
oh, yes.
Slavic nations.
Oh, yes.
So can you say, like in the last 500 years, for example, like from which group of languages influenced Hungarian the most? Because I see like many similar words, for example, with Slavic languages.
Of course, yes. When Hungarians settled to the Carpathian Basin, there were a so-called Avar group that was very much influenced by Western Slavic people, and their language was almost demolished. But the arriving Hungarians could talk to them, so they must have had Turkic or Mongolian languages, some kind of, but the Slavic influences gradually became more and more important, and from southern, eastern, western, northern Slavic groups we were influenced, and our language got dozens, hundreds of Slavic loan words. We also had new phonemes from the Slavic languages, as well as we had got new phonemes from the Turks previously. So we had, for instance, no ge sound in initial position before we met the Turks. But after that, we started to use it very widely. And such as the j sound from the Slavic languages. And I could mention many, many other details.
Yeah, of course.
But yes.
Is it possible to detect which language group, let's say the main ones right now, so Indo-European?
Yes, Indo-European.
Greek as well. So which language actually influenced Hungarian the most, vocabulary-wise?
The Indo-European languages.
Back to the Turks. What did Hungarians bring from the East? Or like better to say, like what did Turks bring to Hungary besides this big influence on the language?
It is a very good question, because culture doesn't only consist of vocabulary or language. And the dictionaries are a very good reflections of any languages, because they contain especially the most important terms of expressions of the ideas and the habits and the history and many, many other details of those people, the speaking. It is music. Hungarian music was highly influenced by Turks. And we have many similarities. And my husband, since my husband is an ethnomusicologist, and he had researches from any region of the Turkic-speaking worlds, from the Caucasus, from Central or Inner Asia, from the Issyk-Kul in Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan or Azerbaijan. So I know a lot of details about the similarities. What is very important, we just have to think about when a mother wants her baby to sleep, she starts to sing something that would make the baby not cry but sleep. It is a kind of habit that comes down from centuries. We never want to be fashionable when we sing for our babies. It is the same with the one who died. There are so-called sad occasions when somebody is singing at a funeral, and all these styles never consider fashion. It is no question. They are preserved from centuries, and they remain the very same. And so they are, for instance, very similar in Hungarian and Turkic folk music. Apart from music, we have, as I mentioned, agriculture, and it is not only how to find a good harvest on the fields, but also it considers animal husbandry, how you just look after your herds, let it be smaller or bigger, it doesn't matter. They influenced a lot. They even taught us, Turks, I mean, even taught us how to make wine. Bor is our word for wine, and bor is a very important word in Old Turkic, not after the Islam, but prior to the Islam. Mm-hmm. And all the methodology and the details are found in our vocabularies, in our Hungarian.
So with wine, and you said with beer as well, also from the Turkic language.
For beer, in connection with beer, I mentioned the Huns. And
the Huns, actually.
Yes.
Can I ask you which regions of Hungary? I mean, Hungarian obviously has many different dialects.
Oh, yes,
here.
Sure.
So which regions of Hungary were influenced the most by Turkish, and then again, which dialects were influenced by the Turkish language?
The area where I was born, for instance, is the very central field of Hungary. Is called Kunság, and Kun is the name of the Kuman people. The Kuman Turks, Middle Turkic language, they are of Kipchak origin, and they got assimilated by the end of the 17th century. But until then, they spoke their own languages. And from the 13th to the 17th century, Kuman Turk was spoken there. And we still have some specialties. I think it is the most influenced by a Turkic language.
Which part of Hungary is it actually, the region, in the north and the south?
No, it is the middle.
In the middle?
The middle.
Okay. And here in Budapest, let's say that the Buddhist side here was under the Ottoman dominance.
Yes,
yeah.
Buda Castle was also inhabited by different Turkic and also Balkan people. Now, they were not naturally only Turkic, but Slavic origin. Southern Slavic groups also spoke most probably Turkic.
One thing about the alphabet.
Yes.
So the Orkan runic and the Hungarian runic alphabets are related?
We have no proof for that. We have much more texts in the Orkan, the Old Turkic runic kind. We do not have enough from the westernmost part of the steppe region. We have quite a few, but not enough to prove that. So most probably they were not related. Until now, we could not read Western runic texts by the help of Old Turkic.
In the school here as well, when we had the classes of Hungarian, the teachers, they sometimes say that the most similar language with the, let's say, contemporary Hungarian is Finnish. And yes, I mean, we talked already about the Ugro-Finnic origins, but it's not actually as similar as like most of the people claim here, right?
It is not similar at all.
At all. So it's like a total misconception with us, foreigners.
If you just try to listen, try to understand, you will not understand one single word from Finnish, unfortunately. They have kind of other kind of phonetic morphology is differing a lot. So even if the idea of being related, can you imagine when we got separated from those Finnish people?
Yes.
Much earlier than from the Turks. So it is already in the mist.
I heard about the separation, basically, that Finnish people were considered like by the Hungarians, like back then, like as like peasants of sorts, and that they were like more. They looked upon with high regard to Turkish people actually than to Finnish people, like all the way back then.
Yes, exactly.
Can you tell us a bit about the old Hungarian beliefs, the old Hungarian
Yes,
religions?
why not? Yes, how can we know about them? It is an important question to just to imagine, because all these were not necessarily written down, and all these believers were not always able to write and read. So the legendary part of this habit of curing people, for instance, by the help of natural elements like small or big stones or vegetables or just leaves collected on the fields, are important traditions, and they are mentioned in folk tales, in folk literature, even in songs. How can we know, for instance, that Hungarians also knew the habit of rain magic? It was an important knowledge on the steppe region, because also in Central Asia and Inner Asia we have quite long texts, like the texts of songs sung at rituals when they started to just influence weather, especially when there were difficulties, when there were very dry years and there was no harvest or whatsoever for the people to live on. They decided to influence weather. And for instance, just rain magic was also known to Hungarians. We have anecdotes, we have gestas, we have chronicles mentioning this habit, but also we have kind of vague knowledge on shamanism. Shamanism is well spread throughout Siberia. Shaman itself is a Manju Tungus word. Manju Tungus also belongs to the Altaic group of where Mongols and Turks belong to. Now, shaman can be, first of all, a healer that is very useful for the community. He can cure several illnesses. He knows the way how to make somebody get rid of the shaitan, for instance, or any evil souls. But the first and most important function of the shaman is that in the situation of trance, he is able to travel to the further world and also to the outer world. So he can get messages from those who deceased.
he can find out future events. And after he comes to himself, when he gains back his consciousness, he can tell the community what is going to happen in the near future. Now, these double function, the healer and the traveler, is also the main function of the Hungarian Táltos. Táltos is a very important figure in Hungarian folk tales. Táltos is somebody who is fighting with other Táltos to gain power upon a certain situation. And Táltos is also a name for the magic horse who can run as fast as the wind, or who is able to fly even to the high sky, and who is able to talk on human language when necessary, when he wants to warn his chevalier, when he wants to bring some information to him that is valid and important and vital for him. Now, Táltos is the name of both the horse, the magic horse, and the man who is doing the role of a shaman in the Hungarian tales. Now, this Táltos horse can have some different number of legs, 3 or 6 when necessary. And this is also present in Turkic epos. There is a world famous epos, the Manas. The Manas is the Kyrgyz epos, and there are people singing this Manas tradition throughout days and nights for a whole week, for instance. Even today they are able to do that. It is a kind of magic ancient tradition that keeps alive the national feeling. We belong to the same group and we know about it and we want to learn our tradition, kind of. But as for myself, I carried out important field work among the Karachay Balkar Turkic people living in the Caucasus, and they migrated to Anatolia, and they preserved the ancient traditions from the Caucasus. This is one of my researches. Another one was carried out in Trakya, in Thrace. That is the westernmost part of Turkey, and I studied there folk Islam among the Bektashi and Alevi people. Another important research for myself is a linguistical one that was carried out in the Volga, Kipchak area among Tatar and Bashkir people. If you are interested, I can tell about it, but this was the topic of my first dissertation.
Can I ask, you mentioned the symbol, let's say, of horse,
yes.
of a horse
yes.
in the old Hungarian beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we know that horses had a very big significance as well in the nomadic culture, with Huns as well. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yes, especially white horse. White, it had to be white. White horse was a noble present to rulers and it was presented to the ruler, to the king of the neighbor emperor, for instance. It was sacrificed in certain cases. Before vital wars, white horse was sacrificed, and this white horse sacrifice is still a living tradition in eastern Anatolia. I have recordings on it. I also wanted to mention that if you think about the importance of a good horse among nomads who were spending their whole life on horseback, and they had no name for table. They did not need to have a table. They were eating and sleeping and living on horseback. So it is also very good to know that horse was one of the important helper of the people living those age, but also shepherd dogs who helped them herding on the wide region. So all these traditions are written down also in Turkic and Hungarian tradition.
But right now, Hungary is a Catholic nation.
Yes.
And I mean, we heard from you about all the influence that Turks left here in Hungary as well. So how come that right now, in 2018 and before, there are so little traces of Islam, for example, on the Hungarian
No,
culture,
there had never been Islam influence on Hungarian culture. Hungarians wanted to remain safe and autonomous in Central Europe, and when they settled down, our wise king, Stefan I, decided that it is only possible if we join Christianity. So it was in 1000 that Hungarians joined the group of Christians, and not only the noblemen were baptized, but gradually the whole population. And it is not necessarily Catholic, as you mentioned, but there are huge numbers of Protestants as well, but it is a later development.
So there is a misconception believed by many people that when Ottomans conquered a land, that they forced the peoples of that land to convert to Islam.
No.
Basically, that's a misconception, right?
It is, because they preferred that we pay them debts. So it made them lively, and it was necessary for them. While the Muslims did not pay that kind of taxes to the Ottomans. It was only for the Christians and other religions.
So basically, if somebody would convert to Islam back then, he would pay less tax.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor, for being with us on the show.
It was very
That was
kind of you.
Professor Eva Chaki. I hope you had an interesting time, and hopefully you'll watch us next time as well.